Today is Saturday, July 3rd. We're talking about why most Americans are turning away from organized religions. Recent surveys show, for the first time in our history, fewer than half of American adults say they belong to an established church, mosque, synagogue, or other religious institution. The numbers have dropped significantly in the past 20 years. And while the shift is most prevalent in younger adults, it's really consistent across all generations. Today, we're joined by USC professor Diane Winston, who researches religion and spirituality. She'll get into the reasons why people are turning away from established religious groups and what they're leaning on instead. But first, we're speaking with Pastor Cory Marquez. He left his old evangelical congregation and started a new church to attract more millennials. We chat about how religion is evolving and why he still thinks faith has a place in our modern society. Welcome to the Newsworthy's Special Edition Saturday, when we sit down with a different expert or celebrity every Saturday to talk about something in the news. Don't forget to tune in every Monday through Friday for our regular episodes, where we provide all the day's news in 10 minutes. Fast, fair, fun, and on the go. I'm Lacey Evans, filling in for Erica Mandy during her maternity leave. It's now time for today's Special Edition Saturday. Surveys have shown more Americans have been leaving organized religion. So based on your experience, why do you think this is happening?
Yeah, this is a question that I've been thinking through for 10 years. For me, it has a lot to do with a lot of things. Inauthenticity, corruption, politics, inability to talk about honest conversations in regards to things like sexuality, money, real life. So really, the church has become irrelevant, but for very practical reasons. Sociology shapes theology. And when you talk to more conservative groups, they want to believe that things like the Bible and God are immovable. But that's not even true historically. Things shape and change as culture changes. For example, Galileo Galilei, 500 years ago, got a lot of flack for saying that the sun was the center of the solar system instead of Earth. But we just had better information. And then eventually other people had telescopes. And so the church had to pivot because there was better information out there. So when it comes to birth control, LGBTQ relationships, how we think about science in general, we should pivot as we have better information. Faith groups were really never intended to answer some of those questions. They provide parameters for morality and ethics and a way of being in this world. And you can still have that way of being even as things evolve and progress.
You left an evangelical church to start your own congregation. What inspired you to do that?
Yeah, and it was a great evangelical church. It was probably very moderate compared to where a lot of the evangelical churches are at the moment. There was plenty of D's and R's politically in the room. But for me, there was thousands of people showing up every week. Yet most of my peers, which would be millennials, people in their 30s and younger, just weren't coming to church anymore. It was this question of, well, what would you want to come to? And then really came to the conclusion of, well, then let's build that thing. And building that thing was talking about all the stuff that we just talked about. How do you talk honestly about your humanity? How do you talk honestly about your sexuality? How do you talk honestly about how the world's evolving? So we're not compartmentalized. And the world is so good at that now. We're great at integrative healthcare, and our spirituality should be a part of that.
You've described worship as being less about form and more about content. What does that mean?
The language matters. The words that we're using matters. So whether you come from a liturgical experience and it's chanting or an organ, or it's an evangelical experience that feels more like a rock concert in skinny jeans, or it's yoga and breathing work or embodiment, it's less important to me, the form, as long as the content is freeing you to be the most integrated, healthy, whole, transformed human being that you can be.
Can spirituality and faith really mean anything?
Oh, absolutely. That's the real statistics. For me, I realized 10 years ago as I began to get deeper into these questions, it's not more people were leaving the church and becoming atheist. More people are leaving the church and becoming spiritual. I think there's a Pew report, and I referenced this many times in a bunch of different interviews from sometime in the 1960s, that when you interviewed people, over 50% of the population at the time in Los Angeles County would go to church. And yet if you asked people, had they had a spiritual experience, encountered God, kind of like a profound moment of faith, it'd be like less than 15%. You pulled those same people in 2012, 50 years later, now only 18% of those people go to church or a synagogue or a mosque on a regular basis. And yet over 60% of those people would say that they've had a spiritual experience. People are longing for experiences. People are longing for spirituality. There's this realization that our humanity and spirituality are intertwined, that as we just ask bigger questions about the universe and what it means to be human, we don't want less of God. I think we actually want more of God. We don't want the limitations of religion when religion becomes oppressive or suppressive to our experiences as human beings.
Why do you think so many religious organizations have been slow to adapt or slow to accept that?
Fear, money, power. I guess those are the things. The shadow side of conservatism is always fear. Just like the shadow side of liberalism is anger. There's a place for fear, there's a place for anger, but the shadow side of it tends to limit us in our capacity to really grow or flourish. So for conservatives, and I don't mean in a political sense, I mean in the purest sense of the word, you are conserving something because it works for you. So in the United States, many middle-class white Americans who tend to be evangelical are conserving their form of religion because it tends to work for them. It tends to work for their middle-class white lifestyle and all of the systems that go with that. But for a lot of other people, including white women in those groups, it's, we can't conserve that anymore because it doesn't work. But if you're the power people in those relationships, you want to conserve it because you have all of the power.
No matter what the specific religion, though, what role do you think faith has or should have in our secular society?
I think faith is important. I think faith is beautiful. I think communities of faith are a necessity for the health of humanity and our growth. What environment do you get to go into where you get built-in community, care, intimacy, someone's going to watch over your kids, you get a little bit of psychology, philosophy, all of those things wrapped into one. In so much of our world, you can get those things in individual places. You can hang out at the local pub, be a part of a sporting team, join your YMCA, get a therapist, get daycare. But a faith community can really hold all of those things together at its best in a diverse intergenerational capacity. At its worst, it's pretty monolithic. And unfortunately, there's a lot of faith communities that end up like that. I think faith community is crucial to our health as human beings. And a great example of that, COVID. We're just not meant to be alone. We need other people. We need to experience the depth and richness of life with other human beings.
Still ahead, as religious affiliation drops, how are people replacing that sense of community? And what do the institutions themselves need to do to attract new members? We're talking about this and more with USC professor Diane Winston. But first, here's your main host, Erica Mandy, with today's sponsors.
If you ever feel lost with all the different information and misconceptions out there about health and habits, Noom works to simplify things and help you turn your personal health goals and aspirations into reality. And not just for the month, Noom uses psychology and education to help you stick with it in the long term. Noom's cognitive behavioral approach is meant to help you build habits without an unrealistic, rigorous plan or unforgiving lifestyle. You set your goals and Noom helps you get there. And Noom knows you're busy and doesn't expect to dominate your life. It expects just 10 minutes a day of your time. And there's no bad food. It's more about understanding cravings, helping you eat and feel better, and knowing how to shop. There's also easy food logging and a way to chart your progress for your own healthier habits. You can sign up for your trial today at Noom, Noom.com/newsworthy. Again, sign up for your trial at Noom, Noom.com/newsworthy. Noom wants you to know there's a science to getting healthier, so go to Noom.com/newsworthy. This episode is also made possible thanks to our next sponsor. If there's anything stopping you from being and feeling like your best self, then why not give BetterHelp a try? You can talk to someone when and how you want, on your own time, at your own pace, and you choose whether you talk through text, chat, phone, or video. Of course, everything you share is confidential. There are counselors for everything you may need, including anxiety, family conflicts, grief, stress, and more. BetterHelp will assess your needs and then match you with your own licensed professional therapist, and you can start communicating in less than 24 hours, all without any offices or waiting rooms. And it's easy and free to change counselors anytime to make sure you get the right fit for you. If you've ever thought of giving this a try, now is the time because the Newsworthy listeners get 10% off your first month just by visiting betterhelp.com/newsworthy. I want you to start living a happier life today. So get 10% off your first month at betterhelp.com/newsworthy. Again, that's BetterHelp, H-E-L-P, betterhelp.com/newsworthy.
Thanks, Erica. Okay, now here's my conversation with Diane Winston. Diane, thank you for joining us on the Newsworthy.
Lacey, thank you for having me.
I want to start with the decline in church membership. It's kind of accelerated in the last 2 decades. So what do you think is driving this trend?
When we look at what's happened, there isn't just one answer. A lot of young people, and that's where the greatest disaffiliation in membership has occurred. They are not brought up going to church or synagogue or mosque. And so they don't have anything to fall back on when they become older. This is not part of their life. Secondly, for a long time, there was a social expectation that if you wanted to join the right country clubs, get the right job, marry the right person, you would join a church or a synagogue or mosque. That's no longer true. Then there's politics. A lot of churches and synagogues and mosques have become politicized, and they make their political leanings known to members, and often members feel alienated. Then there's cultural relevance. A lot of people don't see how religion, institutional religion, is culturally relevant. It's not speaking to the issues they care about. There's also the problem that a lot of people feel that religious folks are very judgy and hypocritical. We've certainly seen a lot of scandals. That's a big turnoff to people. Sociologists also say there's just a general lack of interest in religion among young people. It's not that they're hostile. It's basically they don't care about organized religion.
Surveys do show a growing number of Americans describe themselves as spiritual rather than religious. What's the difference between the two, really?
If you're talking about an academic definition, spirituality usually refers to the inner process of feeling connected to a larger whole, a larger existence, a larger cosmos. And religion is about the institutional structures, regulations, dogma, rituals that help the individual link to that larger consciousness. In a sense, they go together, but we've separated them in our culture because religion has had negative connotations to so many people. And so they say, well, let's get rid of the outer casing, the shell of religion, and go straight to the heart of spirituality. It's about a practice that helps you feel or understand the greatness beyond you.
A lot of people, as they're leaving churches, mosques, synagogues, where are they turning to instead for a sense of community? You know, I know there's a lot of people who say things like, when I'm out in nature, that's where my church is. Like, I feel spiritual there. I feel God there. So where are people finding that experience instead?
The basic things you get out of religion and spirituality are a sense of reality greater than yourself, a sense of fellowship, and the ability to serve, to feel like you're of service. So if you want to feel greater than yourself, yes, a lot of people feel that in nature. And, you know, that's what the transcendentalists were all about. They were all about being in nature and feeling that greater cosmic energy. But some people feel that when they're listening to music. Some people feel it when they're looking at art. Some people feel it when they're dancing. There are lots of meetups where people who have common interests and affinities can get together. And although they may not talk about religion per se, they will talk about things that give them meaning and make their life worth living.
You've said before that religion can be a force of good, but it can also be a force of evil. Can you expand on that?
The problem with institutional religion is people get really wrapped up in it and believe that their way is the only way, and people who believe differently than them aren't truly human. And that's when religion becomes, in my mind, evil. On the positive side, though, religion can be an inspirational force for helping others. And, you know, the classic example is Mother Teresa. But there are plenty of people walking around today everywhere in the world who do good work for others and are not celebrated or not known. In fact, I'm working on a project at USC where we're looking for what we call people who are spiritually engaged, but most of us don't even recognize the work they're doing. And I think that describes many people who, whether they're religious or spiritual or humanist, just realize that there's more to life than money, power, and success. It's about giving back.
Do you think religious organizations need to evolve? And if so, how?
Oh my gosh, yes, they definitely need to evolve, because if they keep on the way they're going, they're all going to be extinct, right? There will be a religious remnant, but the numbers are just falling way too much to keep doing what they're doing. I think the answer would lie in a lot of self-criticism and a lot of internal thought about why aren't we reaching people and how do we do it.
Diane, final thoughts before I let you go.
It's hard to be in the middle of an evolutionary scenario. When I covered religion for newspapers, there were always people bemoaning the decline of traditional churches. But things change and new things come into being that are more exciting, more relevant, more speaking to the current cultural moment. Religious institutions are failing now because they are not speaking to this current cultural moment. I mean, not all of them are. There's some very exciting new congregations that have sprung up. But for the most part, it's hard to change. It's hard to let go of things. And yet that's where the creativity is and the joy.
Thank you to Diane Winston and Cory Marquez for sharing their thoughts and expertise. If you want to read more about either of them, check out today's episode notes. As for the Newsworthy team, we'll be off this Monday to celebrate the long 4th of July weekend. Then we'll be back on Tuesday for our next regular episode when we round up all of the day's news in about 10 minutes. Until then, have a great holiday weekend.